Jack Cooper's boots crunched against the crystalline frost coating the salvage yard's ground, each step echoing in the pre-dawn silence of Arcturus Defense Academy. The stolen keycard in his pocket felt like it weighed a ton, but the risk was worth it. He needed to test his theory about the power fluctuations he detected during yesterday's routine scan. His contraband Earth-made multimeter, ancient by galactic standards, bumped against his hip as he moved between towering hulks of abandoned alien vessels. The Arcturus administration had nearly expelled him last month for refusing to trade it in for a proper xenotech diagnostic tool. But there was something about the old family tool that just felt right in his hands. Primitive technology for a primitive species, his Altarian instructor had sneered. Jack smiled at the memory. That same instructor couldn't figure out why their brand-new quantum analyzer kept giving false readings on the practical exam. The massive silhouette of the Vox Theory warship loomed ahead, its iridescent hull still magnificent despite centuries of neglect. Most cadets avoided this section of the yard. Something about the ship's dormant quantum core made their advanced sensors go haywire. But Jack's multimeter had picked up something yesterday that reminded him of the old Chevy engines his uncle used to restore. "Just like you taught me, Uncle Mike," Jack muttered, pulling out the multimeter. "Listen to what the machine's trying to tell you." He pressed his hand against the hull, feeling for vibrations. The metal was warm, way warmer than it should be for a derelict ship in the freezing pre-dawn air. His multimeter's display flickered as he moved it across the surface, the needle dancing in a familiar pattern. Ka-thunk, ka-thunk, ka-thunk. Jack's eyes widened. That rhythm, it was impossible, but it sounded exactly like Cadet Cooper. A sharp voice cut through the silence. "This area is restricted." Security Chief Lixthar approached on her forelegs, compound eyes glowing with anger. The Arachnid administrator had been gunning for Jack since the multimeter incident. "Chief, I can explain," Jack started, but then his multimeter let out a sharp whine. The needle swung hard right. A deep resonance emerged from within the ship, like a massive engine turning over. The sound hit Jack in the chest, and he recognized it instantly. The rhythm of a 4-stroke cycle, just like his uncle's garage back home. But this was bigger, much bigger. "Step away from the vessel," Lixthar ordered, but her mandibles clicked in confusion as the ship's hull began to pulse with a soft blue light. "Chief, listen." Jack pointed to the hull. "That's not random quantum noise. It's a timing issue. The ship's core is trying to cycle, but something's preventing the full rotation. It's just like a what, Cadet?" A new voice joined them. Ambassador Vexthi of the Vox Theory stepped into view, his ceremonial robes shimmering in the growing light. "Please, enlighten us about our civilization's greatest technological achievement." Jack swallowed hard but stood his ground. 3 centuries of the galaxy's finest engineers had failed to restore this ship. His career at the Academy would probably end right here, but he knew what he was hearing. "Sir, with respect." He held up his ancient multimeter, its display still dancing in that telling pattern. "It's just like a timing belt problem in an old internal combustion engine. Your ship isn't broken, it's just out of sync." The ambassador's bioluminescent spots flickered in what might have been amusement or outrage. "Interesting theory, Cadet. And I suppose you learned this from your primitive Earth machines." Jack nodded, his voice firm despite his racing heart. "Yes, sir. And I think I can prove it." The Galactic Engineering Summit's main hall buzzed with activity as representatives from 37 spacefaring civilizations gathered to discuss the latest breakthroughs in quantum mechanics. Jack stood at the back, his Academy uniform drawing curious glances from the assembled alien dignitaries. He wasn't supposed to be here either, but Ambassador Vexthi had insisted, right after confiscating his multimeter. "As you can see," the ambassador gestured to the holographic display of the warship's quantum core, "the temporal variance in the exotic matter injection system continues to defy conventional analysis. 3 centuries of research suggest." Jack's hand shot up before he could stop himself. The ambassador's bioluminescent spots pulsed with irritation at the interruption. The human cadet wishes to contribute. Vexthi's tone carried the diplomatic equivalent of a sneer. Please, enlighten us with Earth's perspective on quantum engineering. The room's atmosphere shifted as hundreds of alien eyes, compound, singular, and some indefinable, turned to focus on Jack. He pulled out his personal tablet, hand steady despite his racing heart. Permission to access the hall's audio system, sir. Jack kept his voice level, channeling his uncle's calm during tough repairs. When the ambassador nodded, Jack connected his tablet and pulled up a file he prepared hours earlier. The sound of a 1967 Chevrolet engine filled the hall. Some aliens recoiled at what they probably considered primitive noise, but Jack raised a finger. Now listen to this. He overlaid the recording from his multimeter of the warship's core frequency. The rhythms matched perfectly, their beats synchronizing in an undeniable pattern. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Impossible, muttered a Zentarian physicist, their crystalline form refracting light in patterns of disbelief. The quantum variance couldn't possibly. But it does, Jack interrupted, bringing up a side-by-side frequency analysis. Your ship's quantum core isn't malfunctioning because of exotic matter degradation or temporal misalignment. It's out of sync because the mechanical system that coordinates the quantum injection cycle is damaged, just like a timing belt in an old engine. The ambassador's spots now pulsed rapidly. You dare suggest our civilization's greatest achievement operates on principles as crude as your internal combustion engines? No, sir. Jack stepped forward, gaining confidence. I'm suggesting that the basic principles of mechanical synchronization are universal. Your quantum drive is incredibly advanced, but at its core, it still needs to maintain a precise mechanical rhythm to function. The math proves it. He projected the engine timing diagram alongside the quantum core's operational data. The patterns were undeniable, and the assembled engineers began to murmur with growing interest. And you believe you can repair this mechanical issue? The ambassador's voice held a dangerous edge. I know I can, Jack replied, then added quickly, but we should probably focus on the theoretical implications first. And a priority message flashed across the hall's holographic displays. The ambassador's spots shifted to a pale yellow, a sign of distress Jack had learned about in xenobiology class. The Ancestral Fleet Review, Vexthi whispered. It begins in 30 minutes, our most sacred ceremony, where we honor our technological heritage. The ambassador turned to Jack, desperation replacing diplomatic poise. The warship was supposed to lead the procession. 3 centuries of failure. And now, Jack felt the weight of centuries of alien engineering bearing down on him. He thought of his uncle's shop, of learning to trust his hands and ears over fancy diagnostic tools, of understanding that sometimes the simplest solution was the right one. Give me back my multimeter, Jack said firmly. And 30 minutes. I'll have your ship ready. The silence in the hall was deafening. Then Ambassador Vexthi did something unprecedented in the history of Vox theory diplomacy. He laughed. The warship's engine room hummed with an energy that made the alien diagnostic equipment useless. Their quantum sensors flickered and died, unable to process what they considered impossible readings. But Jack's multimeter stayed steady, its ancient digital display tracking the core's rhythm like a heartbeat. Your diagnostic systems are too advanced, Jack explained to the cluster of alien engineers following him. He pressed his hand against a massive conduit, feeling the vibration. They're programmed to filter out what you consider mechanical noise, the exact noise we need to hear. A Zentarian engineer crystallized in frustration, their facets reflecting the engine room's pulsing lights. But the quantum equations clearly indicate. Forget the equations for a minute, Jack interrupted, earning gasps from the assembled aliens. Listen to her. The ship's trying to tell us what's wrong. He pulled up the engine schematics on his tablet, comparing them to the rhythmic vibrations echoing through the hull. The quantum drive's design was incredibly sophisticated, but the basic principle was familiar. Instead of pistons and fuel injection, it used quantum fields to compress exotic matter. Different mechanism, same 4-stroke cycle his uncle had taught him about since he was kid. "Look here," he pointed to a section of the holographic display. "Your quantum field injectors fire in sequence, just like cylinders in an engine. But the timing's off because..." He stopped, eyes widening as he finally spotted it. Jack sprinted to a maintenance panel, his heavier Earth gravity muscles easily ripping open the sealed cover that alien engineers had been treating with delicate precision tools for centuries. Inside, a massive crystalline gear system stretched into the darkness, each piece precisely crafted to coordinate the quantum injection sequence. There, he pointed to where two of the largest gears met. The synchronization system isn't just mathematical, it's physical. These quantum crystal gears coordinate the actual injection sequence. And that one. He indicated a gear with nearly imperceptible wear on 3 teeth, is microscopically misaligned. Ambassador Vexthi leaned forward, spots pulsing with intense colors. "Impossible. Our quantum crystal manufacturing is perfect." The mathematical precision. "Math isn't everything, Ambassador," Jack said, pulling tools from his belt. "Sometimes metal, or crystal, just wears down. No equation can prevent that." He reached into the gear housing, ignoring the alien's horrified reactions as he used his bare hands where they'd only dare use precision Waldos. The subtle vibration pattern changed under his fingers, confirming his theory. "Your sensors never caught this because they're calibrated for quantum fluctuations, not mechanical wear. And your maintenance drones couldn't feel the misalignment because they don't have human touch sensitivity." He glanced at his tablet's countdown. 22 minutes remaining. "But these gears are quantum locked," protested a multi-limbed Xerxian engineer. "The energy requirements to realign them would be..." "Exactly what the ship's been trying to do for centuries," Jack finished. "That rhythm we're feeling. It's the core trying to force these gears back into alignment. But it needs help." He pulled out his uncle's old torque wrench, much to the horror of the watching aliens. "Cadet Cooper," the ambassador's voice carried a warning tone. "That tool is hardly appropriate for quantum crystal machinery that took decades to fabricate." Jack smiled, remembering his uncle's words. "Sometimes the right tool is the one you trust, not the one that costs the most." "Sir, with respect, this quantum drive is incredible engineering. But at its heart, it's still a machine. And machines need mechanics, not just mathematicians." He adjusted the wrench's settings. "Now we have 20 minutes to manually realign these gears while the core is cycling. It's going to take timing, touch, and more than a little luck." He looked at the assembled aliens, their various expressions ranging from skepticism to fascination. "Who wants to learn some primitive human engineering?" 18 minutes until the ceremony begins, announced the ship's AI, its ancient voice echoing through the engine room. Jack wiped sweat from his forehead, cursing under his breath as another alien precision tool crumbled in his hands. "These aren't working," he said, tossing aside the remains of what had to be a 1,000,000-credit calibration device. "The tools are designed for species with 3-fingered hands or tentacles. I need..." "These are the finest quantum manipulation instruments in the galaxy," protested the Xerxian engineer, all 6 of their arms gesturing in frustration. "Each one is calibrated to..." A deep groan from the quantum core interrupted them. The misaligned gears shuddered, sending vibrations through the deck plating. Jack's multimeter screamed a warning as the power readings spiked. "The ceremonial fleet is assembling in orbit," Ambassador Vexthi announced, his spots now a pale, worried yellow. "Without our ancestral warship leading the formation." "I know." Jack snapped, then caught himself. "Sorry, Ambassador. But these tools..." He stared at the quantum crystal gears, then made a decision that would probably get him expelled from the academy. "Chief Lixthar, I need you to send someone to my dorm room. Under my bed there's a red toolbox with Cooper Family Auto painted on the side." The security chief's compound eyes flickered with uncertainty. Those primitive implements, near our most sacred technological artifact. Another shudder rocked the ship. The core's rhythm was becoming more erratic. 15 minutes until ceremony, the AI helpfully reminded them. Trust me, Jack pleaded. Those primitive implements are exactly what we need. The ambassador's spots shifted through several colors before he nodded to Lixthar. Do it. The next 5 minutes were tense. Jack explained his plan while they waited, using holographic projections to show how the gears needed to move. The alien's expressions ranged from skepticism to horror as he described manually forcing the quantum crystal teeth back into alignment. But the temporal feedback alone cooled. The Zentarian physicist began. Could what be worse than 3 centuries of failure? Jack challenged. He checked his multimeter again. The core's trying to help us. We just need to work with its rhythm, not against it. A young arachnid cadet burst into the engine room, carrying Jack's battered old toolbox. The sight of its scratched red surface and peeling paint made him smile. Inside were the tools that had fixed everything from ancient Chevrolets to his academy roommate's malfunctioning gravity boots. 10 minutes until ceremony. Okay, Jack said, pulling out his uncle's heavy-duty socket wrench set. Here's the plan. When I give the signal, the core needs to cycle up to maximum power. That'll take some stress off the gears while I realign them. Maximum power. The ambassador's spots turned almost white. The containment systems haven't handled that kind of load in centuries. Which is why, Jack continued, selecting the right socket size, I need volunteers to manually monitor each containment unit. The automated systems won't react fast enough. He looked at the assembled aliens. Who's with me? There was a moment of hesitation. Then the young arachnid cadet stepped forward. I'll help. One by one, others volunteered. Even the Zentarian physicist agreed to monitor the quantum field harmonics. 5 minutes until ceremony. Jack positioned himself by the gear housing, socket wrench ready. Remember, when I say now, hit the core with everything it's got. The sound will be horrible, but that's normal. Probably. The ambassador's spots were practically strobing. Jack grinned, channeling his uncle's pre-repair pep talks. Hey, if it was easy, someone would have fixed it already. He took a deep breath, feeling the core's rhythm through his wrench. Besides, what's the worst that could happen? The ambassador's spots turned an entirely new color. The quantum core could collapse into a singularity, taking half the system with it. Oh, Jack said. Well, let's try to avoid that. 3 minutes until ceremony. 2 minutes until ceremony. Jack's muscles strained against the socket wrench as he made one final check of the gear assembly. Sweat dripped onto the quantum crystal teeth, sizzling on contact. The core's rhythm had become a desperate pulse that everyone could feel now, even through the deck plating. Stations check, he called out, trying to keep the tension from his voice. Containment field 1. Ready. The young arachnid cadet's voice was steady. Quantum harmonics, stable-ish. The Zentarian physicist's crystalline form sparkled with nervous energy. More confirmations echoed through the engine room until all stations reported ready. Jack took a deep breath, remembering his uncle's words during their toughest repairs. The machine knows what it needs. You just gotta listen and give it a chance to heal itself. 1 minute, 30 seconds until ceremony. Okay, on my mark. Jack stopped mid-sentence, his eyes catching something in the holographic schematic still floating nearby. Wait a second. We don't have a second. The ambassador's spots were practically strobing with panic. But Jack wasn't listening. He was seeing something so obvious, so fundamentally simple that 3 centuries of quantum engineers had missed it completely. The gear system wasn't just misaligned. It was misaligned because it was assembled wrong to begin with. He started laughing. Cadet Cooper, Chief Lixthar's mandibles clicked with concern. This is hardly the time for. Look, Jack pointed to the schematics, specifically at the quantum crystal gear assembly's original design. Your engineers have been trying to fix this for 300 years, But nobody ever questioned the basic assembly. These gears aren't worn. They're installed in the wrong sequence. The ambassador's spots shifted to a color Jack had never seen before. Impossible. The assembly sequence was determined by our finest quantum mathematicians. And that's exactly the problem, Jack said, already recalibrating his wrench. They designed it based on quantum theory, not mechanical reality. The math works perfectly on paper, but in the real world. He gestured to the struggling engine. The physical forces want to flow differently than the equations say they should. 50 seconds until ceremony. Jack's mind raced. The solution was clear now, but the fix would be harder than a simple realignment. He'd have to partially disassemble the gear system, reverse the sequence, and put it back together, all while the core was running. New plan, he announced. When I say now, I need the core power dropped to minimum, not maximum. Just enough to keep the quantum field stable. Then I need everyone except the containment team to help me rebuild this assembly. Rebuild. The Xerxian engineer's 6 arms waved in alarm. That's not possible in the time. 40 seconds until ceremony. It's possible if we work together, Jack insisted. He looked at each alien in turn. Your precision tools, my mechanical knowledge. We can do this, but I need you to trust me. There was a moment of tense silence, broken only by the core's irregular pulse. 30 seconds until ceremony. The ambassador's spots settled into a determined purple. Do it. Jack nodded, positioning his wrench. On my mark. Cut power to minimum. Containment team. Keep those fields steady no matter what. Everyone else, watch what I do and be ready to help rebuild. He could feel the machine's rhythm through his tools, through his bones. This was what his uncle had trained him for, though neither of them could have imagined the scale. 20 seconds until ceremony. Jack closed his eyes for a moment, letting his senses sync with the core's pulse. Then he opened them, grinned, and gripped his wrench tighter. Now, the engine room plunged into near darkness as the core's power dropped. Jack's wrench connected with the first gear, and 3 centuries of incorrect assembly began to come apart under his hands. They had exactly 19 seconds to make history, or create a singularity trying. 15 seconds until ceremony. The quantum crystal gears came apart in Jack's hands like pieces of a massive puzzle, each one humming with barely contained energy. His muscles burned from Earth gravity training as he handled components that alien engineers had only ever manipulated with Waldos and force fields. Search-in team, those 3 smaller gears, reversed their sequence. The 6-armed engineer moved with incredible precision, their specialized appendages perfectly suited for the delicate work. Around them, the containment fields flickered as the core's power hovered just above shutdown levels. 10 seconds until ceremony. Centurion, I need that crystalline matrix recalibrated the moment these go back in. Jack's voice strained as he wrestled with the largest gear, its quantum-infused mass fighting him like a living thing. Arachnid cadets, those mounting brackets, rotate them 15 degrees counterclockwise. Secondary containment field failing. Someone shouted from across the engine room. Reroute power from tertiary systems. Jack didn't look up from his work, trusting his newly formed team. The young Arachnid cadet who'd first volunteered was already scuttling across the ceiling to reach the backup controls. 7 seconds until ceremony. The quantum crystal gears hummed in Jack's hands as he began reassembly, his movements guided by a lifetime of mechanical intuition. Each piece slotted into place with a crystalline chime that resonated through the engine room. Field harmonics destabilizing. The Zentarian physicist's crystalline form pulsed with alarm. That's normal. Jack almost laughed, remembering his uncle's words during their first transmission rebuild. If it ain't fighting you, you ain't fixing it right. 5 seconds until ceremony. The final gear, nearly as tall as Jack himself, refused to seat properly. The quantum forces within it repelled his efforts like opposing magnets. 4 seconds. Jack planted his feet, earthborn muscles straining against forces that would have torn most species apart. A little help here." The ambassador himself stepped forward, bioluminescent spots blazing with determination. His tentacular appendages wrapped around the gear alongside Jack's hands. 3 seconds. Push. On. 3. Jack gasped. 1, 2, 3. Human and Vox Theory heaved together. The gears slammed home with a sound like a crystal cathedral ringing. Energy surged through the assembly, making Jack's hair stand on end. 2 seconds until ceremony. Core power restored. The exertion engineer called out, "Field harmonics." 1 second until ceremony. The entire ship seemed to hold its breath. Jack stared at his multimeter, watching the readout stabilize into a perfect rhythm. The quantum drive's pulse aligned with his memory of every well-tuned engine he'd ever heard. Ceremony commencing. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the quantum crystal gear assembly began to spin, each piece moving in perfect synchronization. The core's power rose smoothly, its hum changing from a desperate wheeze to a sound that made Jack's mechanical heart soar. The sound of a machine running exactly as it was meant to. The ambassador's spots shifted through colors Jack had never seen before as sensor readings flooded in. The quantum efficiency, it's higher than our historical records. The power output is perfect. Jack finished, patting the nearest gear housing. The crystalline surface was cool now, vibrating with healthy energy. She just needed someone to listen to what she was trying to tell us for the last 300 years. Through the engine room's viewport, they could see the ceremonial fleet assembling. The ancient warship's quantum drive pulsed with new life, ready to take its rightful place at the head of the formation. The ambassador turned to Jack, his spots settling into a deep, respectful purple. "Cadet Cooper, I believe I owe you an apology." "We all do. We were so focused on quantum mathematics that we forgot the most fundamental law of engineering." Jack raised an eyebrow. "Which is?" Sometimes, the ambassador's spots flickered with what Jack swore was a smile. "You must simply listen to the machine." The moment of triumph lasted exactly 3 seconds before a new alarm shrieked through the engine room. Jack's multimeter screamed as power readings suddenly spiked off the scale. Emergency power surge detected. The ship's AI announced, its ancient voice carrying an edge of concern that shouldn't have been possible. Primary systems initiating mandatory restart sequence. "What's happening?" The ambassador's spots paled to near white. "The ceremony." "The quantum drive's running too efficiently." Jack was already moving, racing between monitoring stations. 3 centuries of compensatory algorithms are trying to correct for problems that don't exist anymore. The ship thinks something's wrong because everything's working properly. The deck plates vibrated beneath them as system after system surged to life. Displays that hadn't functioned in centuries blazed with warnings in a dozen alien languages. "Can't we shut it down?" The Zentarian physicist's crystalline form sparkled with panic. "No time." Jack checked his multimeter readings against the main engineering display. The quantum field's already building. If we shut down now, the feedback could tear the ship apart. He remembered his uncle's words about cascade failures. "Sometimes you gotta ride the lightning, kid." The ceremonial fleet is in position, the AI reported, awaiting flagship. Jack made a decision that would either save them or create that singularity they'd been worried about. "We need to manually override each system before the automatic protocols kick in. Spread out. Find any panel with power flowing through it." The engine room erupted into controlled chaos. The exertion engineer's 6 arms flew across multiple control surfaces, while the arachnid cadets scuttled along ceiling-mounted systems. The Zentarian physicist interfaced directly with quantum field monitors, their crystalline form refracting the emergency lights. "Port weapons array charging," someone called out. "That's impossible." The ambassador's spots swirled with disbelief. Those systems were decommissioned centuries ago. "She's not just restarting," Jack realized, watching power flows cascade across his tablet. "She's remembering. Everything this ship ever was, everything it could do. It's all coming back online at once. A deep thrum vibrated through the hull as ancient gravitics engage. Jack felt the artificial gravity shift as long-dormant systems pulled power. His multimeter's display was a blur of numbers that somehow made perfect sense. Starboard energy matrices at 130% capacity. Quantum field harmonics exceeding design specifications. Hull integrity enhanced by unknown factor. Jack moved through the chaos like his uncle had taught him, one system at a time, trusting his hands and ears more than the frantic displays. Every panel he touched, every circuit he adjusted was like a piece of music falling into harmony. The ceremony begins in 30 seconds, the AI reminded them. This vessel's presence is required. Jack, the ambassador's voice carried both authority and pleading. Can you control this? Jack's hands flew across the nearest control panel, making adjustments that were half science and half instinct. I'm not trying to control it, Ambassador. I'm trying to guide it. This ship, it's like an athlete waking up from a 300-year nap. We just need to help it remember how to move. As if in response, the quantum drive's pitch changed. The warning alerts began to fade one by one as systems synchronized to the new power levels. Jack's multimeter settled into a steady rhythm that matched the core's pulse perfectly. The ambassador's spots shifted to a cautious blue. Is it stabilizing? Jack checked the final readings, then broke into a grin. No, sir. It's not just stabilizing. He gestured to the viewport where the ceremonial fleet waited. It's ready to show the galaxy what 3 centuries of rest will do for a quantum drive. The ship hummed around them, every system singing in perfect harmony. Through the viewport, the first rays of Arcturus's sun caught the ancient hull, making it gleam like new. 10 seconds until ceremony, the AI announced, and this time its voice carried something that sounded remarkably like pride. Flagship status. Ready. The ancient warship glided into formation with a grace that belied its size. Through the viewport, Jack watched as vessels from 37 spacefaring civilizations adjusted their positions to honor the restored flagship. The quantum drive hummed beneath his feet, its rhythm now as familiar as any engine he'd ever worked on. Quantum efficiency 200% above historical records, reported the Zentarian physicist, their crystalline form gleaming with excitement. The new configuration is rewriting everything we thought we knew about quantum mechanics. Not rewriting, Jack corrected, checking his trusty multimeter one last time. Just reminding us that theory and practice need to work together. He patted the nearest bulkhead. Sometimes the best textbook is a broken machine. The ambassador's spots cycled through colors of joy as sensor data continued to pour in. The ceremonial fleet is requesting our technical specifications. They want to know how we achieved the impossible. Tell them the truth, Jack said, starting to pack away his uncle's tools. Each one went back into the battered red toolbox with the care they deserved. Tell them it took quantum mathematicians to build it, but a human mechanic to understand it. The engine room had transformed from a scene of frantic activity to one of quiet awe. Alien engineers huddled around displays, comparing the ship's performance to historical records. The young arachnid cadet who'd first volunteered to help was already sketching designs for hybrid diagnostic tools that combined quantum sensors with primitive mechanical feedback. Cadet Cooper, Chief Lixthor approached, her compound eyes reflecting the healthy glow of the quantum drive. The Academy Board is requesting your presence. Immediately. Jack's heart sank. Despite their success, he had violated at least 15 Academy regulations in the past hour. Yes, ma'am. I understand. They wish to discuss. She continued, mandibles clicking in what he now recognized as amusement. Your recommendation for an immediate field promotion to advanced theoretical engineering. The ambassador's spots turned bright purple. Indeed. The Vox Theory delegation has also submitted a formal request for Earth to establish an engineering exchange program, not to learn our quantum technology, but to teach us your, what did you call it? Shade tree mechanics. Jack laughed, remembering long summers in his uncle's shop. We might need a fancier name for the course catalog. Through the viewport, the ceremonial fleet began its procession. The ancient warship led the formation, its quantum drive singing with renewed power. Aliens of all species stopped to watch Jack pack his tools, their expressions ranging from curiosity to outright reverence. "You know," the exertion engineer mused, all 6 arms gesturing expressively, "there's an old saying among my people. Technology advances, but physics remains constant." "Your uncle would be proud," Chief Lixthar said softly. Jack looked up, surprised. "How did you?" "You mentioned him 17 times during the repair," she clicked. "And now I understand why. He taught you more than mechanics. He taught you to listen." The ambassador gathered them all together for a final sensor reading. The results made his spots dance with joy. 3 centuries of quantum theory, undone by a human with a socket wrench. The galaxy will never be the same. "No, sir," Jack said, closing his toolbox with a satisfying click. "Not undone. Enhanced. Theory tells us what should happen. Experience shows us what does happen. Today proved we need both." As if in agreement, the quantum drive hummed a perfect note. The sound resonated through the engine room, through the hull, and out into space, where 37 civilizations watched in awe as humanity's primitive wisdom breathed new life into their greatest achievement. Jack Cooper, the Deathworlder Cadet who had restored an alien warship in just 30 minutes, smiled and patted his battered old multimeter. Sometimes the simplest tools made the biggest changes, and sometimes it took a step backward in technology to leap forward in understanding. The galaxy would never look at human engineering the same way again, but more importantly, they'd never stop listening to their machines.